All right, welcome to Inside the Numbers. Little show announcement. Today is the last day. Join the People's Pundit community before the price change is implemented, which is tomorrow. If you're already a member and you want to lock in that rate, if you're a monthly person and you want to switch over to the annual, now is the time to do it. If you're not a member or a supporter, now would be the time to join the locals community right now before it goes up from 5 to 7. 5 to 7. We have some governor's races next week. We're going to cover, folks. It's going to be cool. Oh, and YouTube. If you're a member and you follow and you have an election membership or something like that, you can use the code that's in the community section and join locals to take basically the cost of your membership on YouTube away. And then you can be a part of the locals community. Join the revolution. peoplespundit.locals.com. What I would like to do today is continue our conversation from Friday, which is reality check time. John O'Shea will be joining us at 12:30. Attorney General Ken Paxton endorsed him. He is backing him in what is a very key proxy race. All of this today, all three topics you saw on the graphic, I kind of want to just blend into one. All right. Yeah, we're going to have a structured little segment by segment, situation. But the fact is they all blend into one. What is important about the race in Texas's 12th congressional district that is about this reality check I'm trying to give Republicans? What does any of that have to do with this last segment about these trends, right? I've been at the top of my lungs now for months, folks. Women, non-white voters, younger voters. That is what is fueling Donald Trump support right now. And the polls that are showing it, I see a lot of DeSantis pollsters and so-called influencers and experts saying this. No, it's the polls. They're trash. They're just wrong. They're trash. No, they're not. Are we really supposed to expect he's doing this much better with Hispanics? Yes. Are we really supposed to expect he's doing this much better with younger people? Yes. And it should concern you that he is, but you aren't. And we're going to look at a totally different survey. I mean, this is coming from a survey that spans years and years that tracks the views of young people. I said this the other day when Governor DeSantis skipped the Turning Point event. I said, I don't think you can win a Republican primary, like most Republican primaries. I don't think you can win one. Maybe a few areas around the country are the exception. But a nomination, a Republican nomination, by dissing the Turning Point and War Room base of the party, I just don't think the numbers are there anymore. And we're going to look at some of that because Turning Point's directed a lot of attention towards pre-college younger voters. And Barnes and I have told you a lot about this Generation X and the millennials and how they have shifted over time, but what kinds are driving that shift, what demographics are driving that shift. And then, so of course, it does make sense when we look and we see this is why we break up age by detail. Number one, that's what exit polls do. So we try to be, coherent for you. But this is why we do age detail, 18 to 24, 25 to 29, so we can spot things like this. All right. So we've had that episode before, but all of this is going to be into one. Listen, on Gorka on Friday, on Sebastian Gorka, he was filling in for, I believe, Rob Schmidt. It was at the 8 o'clock hour on Newsmax. I went on and talked to Sebastian Gorka, and I tweeted about this too. And I lamented that I'm actually rather saddened by how few other experts in my field are being honest with you, with consumers, with donors, with voters, whatever. The bottom line, I've never seen so few people refuse to say something that is so true, which is that this is not an average Republican lead. This is, in truth, let me just make a statement. The 2024 Republican nomination is the least competitive cycle in modern memory. Not only is this not really a race, it's like one of the least most competitive races we have seen in modern memory. Anti-Trump forces spent and will spend hundreds of millions of dollars because they don't seem to understand that. And I gave one person credit for it, Harry Enten. CNN, of all places. Harry is the only other person that has been, in my field anyway, honest, despite the fact that he knows his audience does not want to hear it. And not only did he regurgitate things he said before and things that I've been saying now for months, but he added something to it which further backed what I have been telling you. You can take a dig at Mark Penn on Twitter if you want. You can try to mock Mark Penn and his work with Harris. The fact of the matter is, you would have to also knock Emerson. You would have to also knock all these other polls in 2020 that never had Donald Trump ahead, including us. It doesn't hold water. The truth is, Donald Trump is in a stronger position to become the president of the United States today than he ever was in 2016 against Hillary Clinton. His coalition is bigger, it's stronger, it's more secure, and it's filled with a bunch of demographic groups that Democrats cannot let slip away. Underclass, more non-white, younger. Yet while he still holds and retains support among traditional Republican groups, seniors, some of which he actually slipped and lost in 2020 a little bit. Well, they're back, and all these other people are new. Yet, when we ask those very same people about other Republican candidates, they won't vote for them. So that's another major problem with the polls are trash theory. They're not trash. You're wrong. You're delusional. And you're, in fact, the same people who told us all we need to unskew the polls. David Plouffe is wrong. David Axelrod is wrong. Every single poll for every single media outlet is wrong. If we unskew the polls, then we get the result we want. You know who believed that nonsense? The candidate and his vice presidential loser idiot pick. And that's why after a half an hour, 45 minutes tops of voting, he was in tears, a grown-ass man. He thought he was going to be elected the president of the United States. He was not. And now we're back here all these years later. You have got to be kidding me. Believe the voters when they tell you something. Let's read this and then we'll move on. All right, here we go. I'm just going to read this verbatim. Instead of going back to what I myself wrote, we're going to read this verbatim. Here's Harry Enton. The chance of Trump winning another term is very real. Harry is a lefty. Harry knows that CNN readers do not want to read this. Donald Trump is facing 2 indictments with the potential for more. He will get more. Political wisdom may have once suggested the former president's bid for a second White House term would be nothing but a pipe dream. But most of us know better by now. Read that again. But most of us know better by now. So if that's true, folks, why is the grift continuing? Why do influencers, they make money. That's right. Never mind. Why does Jeff Rowe, he's making a fortune. Why does Ken Cuccinelli, he's making a fortune too. Even though he's going behind DeSantis's back and trying to convince others to get into the race like Glenn Youngkin, and he will literally take the Never Back Down PAC's money away from Ron DeSantis and give it to Glenn Youngkin if Glenn Youngkin is stupid enough to get into this race, but he's not stupid enough. He said, no, thank you. Call me when the president is either imprisoned and removed from the ballot or completely collapses in the polls. Until then, I am not your Huckleberry. Smarter than the last guy, apparently. Trump is not only in a historically strong position for non-incumbent to win the Republican nomination, but he is in a better position to win the general election than at any point during the 2020 cycle and almost at any point during the 2016 cycle. Thank you, Harry. No one in Trump's current polling position has lost an open presidential primary, i.e., one without an incumbent, in the modern era. And that goes without saying that there is an argument to be made, that I have made, that he is more of a hybrid kind of a candidate. He is an incumbent, yet still an insurgent who is not in office. He's pulling in more than 50% of support in the national polls, which is more than all of his competitors combined. Again, reality check to Mitt Willard and the DeSantis team. If Willard was successful at convincing everybody to get out of the race by February 24th, it still doesn't matter because you don't have enough votes. He's not fallen below 50. Your pollster should have explained this to you. 3 prior candidates in open primaries were pulling in more than half the vote in primary surveys in the second half of the calendar year before the election. Democrat Al Gore and Republican George W. Bush in 2000. Democrat Hillary Clinton in 2016. Gore remains the only non-incumbent to win every single presidential nominating contest, while Bush and Clinton never lost their national polling advantage in their primaries. Today, Trump's closest primary competitor, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, has fallen below 20% nationally. Actually, we're going to take a look at a New York Times poll here very soon. He is finally, do you remember, the New York Times poll is basically identical to our last national poll, which people lamented. There's no way DeSantis is at 17%. There's no way. It's getting so old, isn't it? Where are the apologies? No other contender is at or above 10. This makes the margin between Trump and the rest of the field north of 30 points on average. A look back at past polls does show candidates coming back from deficits greater than 10 points to win the nomination, but none greater than 30 points at this point. Yes, even this early. In fact, the biggest comebacks when you average all the polls in the second half of the year before the election top out at about 20 points. Democrats George McGovern in 1972, Jimmy Carter in 1976, and Barack Obama in 2008. Here's the problem, however, which he doesn't bring up again. He thinks because he mentioned it in a prior paragraph, everybody will understand it, but they don't. These candidates were not at or above 50%, which is statistically significant. There's simply not enough votes. These candidates were dueling between 30 and 10 points. McGovern, 30. Or at 11 or 12. Against another candidate at 30. Hell, even Trump. Even when he was at 1% before he came down the escalator. You're only talking about Walker and Bush in the 20s and 30s. So when you look at the disparity between the lead, you're like, yeah, that was 20 points. First of all, that was months ago by now. He came down the escalator in June. That's number one. Number two, it's almost 2 months ago. Number two, we're not even talking about against other candidates that had a third of the vote. They didn't even have a third of the vote, let alone a majority. Obama did fall nearly, and it's important, 30 points. I made this point myself a couple months ago. If you remember, I got into a Twitter fight with DeSantis' influencers. They were wrong. I was right, of course. Obama did fall nearly 30 points behind for a brief period in the fall of 2007, which was fueled largely by the Gallup poll, by the way, not everybody. Though his comeback the following year and that of Republican John McCain, another eventual nominee who trailed by over 10 points nationally, points to another reason why Trump is so strong right now. Trump is leading not just nationally, but in the early voting states as well. He's up double digits in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina. Obama was within single digits of Clinton and Iowa poll leader John Edwards at this point in the 2008 cycle. Similarly, Clinton's edge was in the single digits over Obama in South Carolina at this stage of the campaign. We're not talking about that right now. This is a blowout everywhere, including, which I just tweeted about, the governor's own home state. because I've been told by numerous people that he's just not a quitter. He's not going to quit. He will lose Florida before he quits. You know what? He's a grown-ass man. And if he chooses to get his ass kicked in his own state, so be it. But he's going down because our polling is right, Florida Atlantic University is right, and the New York Times, I hate to admit it, today is right. We all cannot be showing the same exact thing. It's not just nationally, although the New York Times is nationally. It just simply backs up what those of us who are doing both national and state level polling are showing. And again, the media and these surrogates and these influencers are acting like this is nothing. There's no difference in this example. There's a huge difference. There is no comparable example in the modern record. He is overwhelmingly winning. Well, does that mean we should just cancel a primary? If you want to spend $500 million on 10% of the vote, you're an idiot. I'm sure Democrats would love it. Don't give me the democracy argument. First of all, this is a republic, or supposed to be. Secondly, it's not very democratic for media, the ruling class, and the donor class to refuse to accept the majority will and spend all their resources to get 10% of the vote. That's anti-democratic. On the Republican side in 2008, the primary deck was much more unsettled than the national numbers indicated at this point. Rudy Giuliani was up nationally, but he lagged Mitt Romney in Iowa and New Hampshire. Romney couldn't get much above 30% in either state, unlike Trump right now. McCain, whose candidacy is often held up as an example of how DeSantis might come back, was always considerably closer to the national and state frontrunners than anyone is to Trump at this moment. It's not even close. Of course, winning the primary is one thing for Trump, who has led in almost every single Republican primary poll published in the last 8 years, except for the Marquette poll. Can we just address the elephant in the room? What the hell has the Marquette poll been doing? The so-called gold standard in Wisconsin that's missed Wisconsin like 3 times in the last 3 cycles. What the hell are they doing? The only one who looks like Marquette is DeSantis' own pollster. And the closest one to that is the NBC News poll, which is jointly conducted by Hillary Clinton's old pollster and DeSantis' polling firm. There's just no conflict there. What should arguably more amazing is that despite most Americans agreeing that Trump's 2 indictments thus far were warranted, I don't know where you got that from, Harry, that is disputed. He remains competitive in a potential rematch with Joe Biden. A poll out last week from Marquette had Biden and Trump tied percentage-wise, but a statistically insignificant few respondents more choosing Trump. Yeah, if you look at it, it was 50-50, but if you look, I think like 13 or 15 interviews more were for Trump. But rounded, it's still 50-50. Bottom line, anyway, I call bull, on that poll because nothing is 50-50, especially not at this point in the race. Hell, even when you get down to the day or two before election day, it's not going to be 50-50. The Marquette poll is one of the number of surveys showing Trump either tied or ahead of Biden. The ABC News Washington Post poll had published 3 surveys in the matchup between the two, and Trump has come out ahead in each one, or every time. And actually, Harry, you're wrong when you say that, albeit within the margin of error, every time. He was not in the last one. In the last one, he was outside the margin of error. It was 7 points. Other pollsters have shown Biden only narrowly ahead. To put that in perspective, Trump never led in a single national poll that met CNN standards for publication for the entirety of the 2020 campaign. Biden was up by high single digits in the late summer of 2019. Biden is up by maybe a point in the average of all the polls today. Surveys, and that's only because of one skewing the average badly, and we all know who that is. Surveys in the late summer of 2015 told the same story. Clinton was up by double digits over Trump in late July and up by mid to high single digits by the end of August 2015. Hell, CNN's own final poll was like Clinton plus 11 or something. And the AP was Clinton plus 14. The fact that the polling between Biden and Trump is so close shouldn't be much of a surprise. Elections are a choice between 2 candidates. Trump isn't popular, but neither is Biden. The two of them in tandem would be the most disliked presidential nominees in polling history if their numbers hold through the election. All that being said, the 2024 election will probably come down to a few swing states. And by the way, let me just address that real quick. Trump's very unfavorable rating has basically evaporated since he has not been president. Even in the polls where his unfavorable rating overall has remained steady, it has gone more in the intensity that favors him than intensity that is unfavorable to him. That was not true throughout his presidency and even in most polls before 2016. Our polls were different. We had him much more favorable in some of the swing states. Like in Florida, he was always positive in Florida or close to it in our polling. In Ohio and in Iowa, he was actually kind of liked. Pennsylvania, it was pretty close. Nationally, it was ugly because of like California and New York. And polling in swing states has been limited because we're still over a year from the election. That's not really true. Suffolk, and I know we probably don't meet CNN's standards. The fact is, we keep leading a trend. You can play this game all you want, but the public isn't dumb. We have been leading the trend. Like, people are literally taking our terminology now. We have authored the nomenclature for this election. Trump or bust. One giant warning sign for Democrats was a late June Quinnipiac University poll from Pennsylvania, a pivotal state in the past few election cycles where Trump raised base supporters in Erie on Saturday. The state barely voted for Trump in 2016 and barely for Biden in 2020. Trump was up on Biden by 1 point in the Quinnipiac poll, a result within the margin, but nevertheless a remarkable achievement for the former president. Even though Quinnipiac had Biden up in their other surveys, during the primary, there was a red flag for Hillary Clinton. In Quinnipiac, they herded to everybody else after, but there was a Trump +1 before he locked up the nomination. Why? It was only the second Pennsylvania poll that met CNN standards for publication since 2015 that had Trump ahead or of either Biden in 2024 or Clinton for 2016. The good news for Democrats is that general election polling, unlike primary polling, is not predictive at this point. That's true. Things can most certainly change. But for now, the chance that Trump is president in less than 2 years' time is a very real possibility. It's more real than it was in 16 or 20. More real. Now, it is true that primary polling at this moment is very predictive. General election, less so, to be sure. However, that's why we don't focus when we talk about this stuff, guys. We are not focusing heavily on things like the head-to-heads and the horse races. We are trying to find out the questions that matter most in this election, ask those questions, prod people for their sentiment about these issues that are going to matter, and use that for predictive value. How many people would vote if Donald Trump is the nominee, and how many people would stay home if Donald Trump is the nominee? How much of an improvement has Donald Trump had among Hispanic voters and Black voters and underclass voters under 30,000 versus 2020 and 16, even though he did improve in 2020, he did. What groups do the Democrats need to hold on to that are now telling us they're going to vote for Trump in a Republican primary? Just this morning, Laura and I were talking about this because somebody asked me about the New York Times poll. It's not simply, and I'll show you right now before we bring on John. It's not simply, where are you? Crosstabs. Okay. And it's going to be a little bit small, but it's not simply that Donald Trump is winning with Hispanics 70-13. 68-13, excuse me. It's that more Hispanics this year are telling us that they're going to vote in a Republican primary. People are like, oh my God, Rich, you have Hispanics way too much in the share of the electorate in Florida. No, we don't. In the 2016 Florida exit polls primary, just want to make sure I'm right here before I bring this up, but I am right. I know I am. In the 2016 Republican primary, Donald Trump won 46% of the vote in Florida. But overall, Hispanic voters were 16% of the electorate. 16%. Rubio won them 52-26. Trump won white voters 51-22 over Rubio. Today, Trump leads 51-33 or something like that among white voters in Florida. And in the New York Times poll right here, he's leading 53-17 nationally. But Trump is ahead 63-20 among Hispanics in Florida. Very close again. It's the governor's own home state. So he does a little bit better than he does nationally, but nevertheless is still getting crushed. The margin is almost the same in Miami-Dade. Maybe a week later, I don't even know, basically a week and a half later, something like that, Florida Atlantic University comes out and shows an even worse result for Governor DeSantis. He's getting killed in Miami-Dade like 70-13 or something. And the Hispanic margin was a little bit bigger. Our sample size was bigger, so I actually think we're probably closer to right. But nevertheless, it's not close. Size does matter. Don't let them fool you. Sample size is kind of like something else, ladies. You don't need to be ridiculous, but you have to have at least something to work with. Bottom line, size matters in polling. So I just, again, don't see this as a particularly competitive race. I see John laughing down there. All right, so let's bring on, because I think that this is a big, big race for several reasons. One, this is a proxy fight. Contrary to what you may or may not hear in the media, the people who are going after Ken Paxton look a lot like the people who are trying to prevent Donald Trump from becoming the nominee. The people who would rather see Kay Granger reelected look very much like the people who would like to see Ken Paxton removed from office. This fight is everywhere. And the bottom line comes down to this. Republicans are well on their way to nominating Donald Trump. That's reality. Get the smelling salts. It's reality. But it will. The bottom line is, the question we still have to answer is, are they going to like repeat 2016 when they still reelected all these schmucks thinking that Trump would like be able to work with them? And Trump did try to work with them. It was one of the biggest mistakes of his presidency. And they just constantly stabbed him in the back. Because I got to tell you this, guys, all those voters we were just talking about, they're gone when Donald Trump is gone. They're gone. Iowa, Ohio, they go back to being battleground states. Pennsylvania goes back to being not possible. We should talk a little bit more about that Erie County rally, because Sean Parnell had talked to media afterwards, and he had said, actually, Pennsylvania is more primed right now. If you look at the registration shifts, it's more red than it was when Trump first carried it. That's true, but even Sean knows. Republicans didn't attract those people. Donald Trump did. You can't win Michigan if you can't win Macomb County. Donald Trump's the only one who wins Macomb County. That's gone. As Mitchell research showed. It's funny because the minute all these pollsters started to ask the very real question of, will you even vote? Then miraculously, they started seeing what we were seeing. All right, let's bring in our next guest. Big endorsement. Big endorsement. Welcome to the show, John O'Shea.
Hey, Rich,
John,
how are you?
Living the dream, buddy. Thanks for coming back.
Oh, my pleasure.
So congratulations. I think this endorsement is bigger than it even normally would be in a normal cycle. I do. So you got, who know, by the way, Ken Paxton has endorsed you.
Yep.
And the president endorses Ken Paxton. The president and Ken Paxton are allies. I think this year, things like this are going to matter a lot, because there are lines in the sand, John. Very clearly,
Agreed.
you're a Republican who's willing to let your political enemies be persecuted, or you're not. Would you agree with that?
100%. No, in fact, I think the parallel analogy you drew between Ken and the lawfare that's being used against President Trump are spot on. I mean, it's in many cases it's the same actors. I mean, you can trace Ken's impeachment all the way back to Merrick Garland's office. So, they have the same nexus. And I agree. This is a fight for the life of our very country. I mean, do we go back to that shining city on the hill and that bastion of freedom under God's divine providence? Or do we descend into a Marxist authoritarian hellhole? And unfortunately, there are way too many Republicans who, in the establishment, who will do anything they can to remain in the uniparty, and they just don't understand the anger and the furor of the grassroots, the precinct chairs, the everyday voters that said, "No, we want our country back. It belongs to us. Give it back."
It's there's this what I call, frankly, a delusion, John, within the Republican Party now, and it stems from weakness and fear. It does, where like if we just get rid of Donald Trump, if we just get rid of troublemakers like Ken Paxton, then they're going to go easy on us, and everything's going to go back to being normal.
Right.
There's an article in the New Yorker this weekend that basically says Donald Trump is an indictment away from being president, right? And the idea is that that they're rallying behind him, and if DeSantis really wants to be competitive, he should be indicted for something like really cool. And and they're kind of joking, but then they get into between. There's a paragraph, maybe paragraph 8, down there, John, where it talks about how they are, in fact, just on the off chance DeSantis was to become a problem for them. And I don't mean just electorally. I mean, they think he's one of them right now. I'm sorry to tell DeSantis supporters, but they do. They think he's because he's always been. All right. Again, reality check is the name of the theme here, and I'm tired of playing this little charade. The guy voted for TPP. He pushed John Kerry to, where's the coup? Where's the coup in Ukraine? Hurry up with the coup. He's one of them. He's always been one of them. All right. But just in case he decides to become MAGA, they have him in the wind here with sending migrants to other parts of the country. They're like, we could build a case on that. And I'm reading it and I'm thinking to myself, this is, and Yossi Gayetner, he's got a Substack. Yossi also wrote, Republicans, you're stupid. You're actually the targets. They're just the ones in the way. Like the Paxtons and the Trumps are the ones in the way. Once they're done with them, you're next up against the wall, dummies. Like the minute you do something that offends them or gets in their way, you will be next. And they just don't get that, John. And I don't know whether the leaders themselves do, but the voters seem to be duped there. It's like what? According to the New York Times poll, let's call it 13 to 17%. They're afraid. They're afraid. Right. Otherwise, they would 100% say, I'm behind the president. How do you know? Look at the general election polling. They'll vote for Trump anyway, and it doesn't matter. It's like, why does 98% of DeSantis voters vote for Trump anyway, but aren't picking him in these primary polls? I've talked to them. We talk to them almost every day. They're afraid, dude. That's what this comes down to. I really would wonder if you could speak to that. Like, do you hear that when you're on the campaign trail from people who are maybe MAGA skeptical, America First skeptical? Like, what do you hear? What's your feeling on this?
I kind of draw a line between two different groups. The MAGA Republican, the America First Republican, they're not scared. They're mad. I mean, I have not
the real
seen
ones.
this mad. Yeah. But that establishment kind of squish Republican that you're talking about, I think they live in fear. For whatever reason, they forget that the number one command in the Bible 365 times is be not afraid. And they live in fear. And right now is not a time to be panicked or in fear. Now is a time to stand up and fight. I mean, honestly, our country hangs in the balance. I know I'm repeating myself and I might sound hyperbolic, but I mean, we have one chance to get this right. And for whatever reason, mean tweets that they're benefiting from, the way that the elite run the country to their own benefit. For whatever reason, they refuse to recognize the fact that the Republican Party has become a national populist party and that it's faith-based and it's grassroots. And the days of the country club Republicans that just want smaller government and some corporate tax breaks, that's over. And President Trump has ushered this in. In fact, I think really the biggest challenge, once we recognize your foregone conclusion that it is President Trump's primary, Everybody else are just pretenders, and there might be some very decent people there running for the right reason, but they don't stand a chance because everybody understands what I understand, which is Trump or bust. The only reason why I'm running is because we cannot have any more Paul Ryan types that will be stabbing him in the back the moment he tries to institute this policy and tries to root out the administrative state. They are so far gone. The things are so out of control that, in fact, the only thing that I think the Biden regime has gotten right is to pass this federal whistleblower protection. And actually, while I give them a kudos for that, the reason behind it is because they understand that the administrative state is so out of control that they're not even able to rein them in. And so they're having to ask people to come up and testify before Congress just so that they can understand what's not even being reported through the proper chain of command. We've got one chance, ladies and gentlemen, to get this right. It is Trump or bust. It is the whole reason why I'm running, so that I can be a foot soldier for him, to have him wrest this country back and return it to the hands of we the people.
Yeah, I don't think you're being hyperbolic at all. I've made this statement several times. I mean, the bottom line is in 2016, they didn't make an effort to try to do anything too overt because they didn't think they would have to.
No, but they thought it was Hillary's race.
They thought it was Hillary's to lose. And then they spent the next 4 years undermining the sovereign voter. And then now here we are, all right, even more.
And rigging the system too. Let's not forget. I don't care,
right.
Call me an election denier, but I'm going to believe my own lying eyes as opposed to the mainstream corporate, talking heads.
Yeah, and bottom line, John, that is an extension of, like, they had two choices. They could either look at what happened in 2016 and say there are real grievances that people in the electorate had. We weren't addressing those grievances, and that's why we lost. And that should be a reality check for us. It's our policies, and that's what the Conservative Treehouse. He wrote an article about the poll in Ohio, and I thought it was really illuminating. I mean, he says, I don't hide. I have callous hands, and I don't hide my blue collar roots. The bottom line is the policies of the country club Republicans and the Uniparty hurt us. And they're not dealing with the, pardon my friend, the BS anymore. I'll shorten it. Right. And that's just where it is. They refused to accept that. Instead, they went in a different direction, which was try to use the power of the state to undermine the sovereignty of the voter. Now, all of these years later, from Russia collusion hoaxes to impeachments and on, John, we're now at a point where they're trying to tell us that we're not capable, we're not allowed to choose who we want as the leader of our country. That's what this is about. So it isn't hyperbolic to say what you said, because if they win this, and this is not a pro-Trump argument, this is a matter of fact. Without Donald Trump being in the race, you could replace him with Bernie Sanders, and it would still be the real question that will be decided in this election. Can Americans choose their own leaders? Because if they're successful, all we will get from now on, it was already a charade or a hologram, but all we will get from now on is the illusion that we're picking our own leaders. And in truth, there'll be these cookie cutter candidates that are like administrative state approved. That's the slate we'll get to choose from, and that's it. So again, it's never, even throughout the Russia collusion hoax, if you were, anti what the government was doing there, it had really didn't have anything to do with Donald Trump. He was just somebody who was a threat to them. So they decided to do that to him. If anybody else was a threat to them, they obviously would feel emboldened enough to do it as well. And in fact, John, the truth is, this is the Hoover model our government's been using on presidents for years. And he just didn't play ball. The rest of them played ball. And that's what happened. That's why nothing ever changed. That's why nothing ever really moved forward. We never had any progress. Because those guys sat down, they got the folder thrown in front of them, and they caved like a bunch of you-know-whats. Donald Trump did not. And that's the problem, which Chuck Schumer openly said, what are you doing? Don't pick a fight with these people. They can screw you every way till Sunday. But, that's number one. Number two, watching, this is a difficult, topic to go into, but it's relevant to your race. What we saw last week with Mitch McConnell, everyone's like, oh, Rich, you're so insensitive. You know what I'm sensitive about? I'm sensitive about the fact I have 3 children. I'm sensitive about the fact that this country is like everything the anti-federalists said were going to happen is happening. All right. I'm sensitive about the fact that we have these corrupt old men like Mitch McConnell sitting around permanent fixtures, freaking dinosaurs for years. They're supposed to be running the country and they're having mini strokes in front of the microphone. A president who falls walking upstairs and no less than 3 times in his first term. This is what I'm sensitive about. So I pray Mitch McConnell doesn't have any health issues, blah, 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 blah. What I really pray about is if we could get some real leadership that is competent. You're running against a woman, for all due respect to her service. She is in no real different shape than this. But because she's on appropriations, it's like, supposed to be, she's like, what, royalty, John? I mean, I'm not trying to put you in a bad position here. I'm just saying, like, we need new blood. We're like you, we need new people who are step forward and say, all right, I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to serve. I'm not going to make a thing out of it, but I'm willing to serve. We cannot have these people there. We are $30+ trillion in debt. We are one bad diplomatic crisis away from World War III. And we have majority and minority leaders who can't speak. We have senators who can't talk. We got presidents who can't walk or talk. I mean, this is, I'm sorry, man. I don't mean to sound insensitive, but Kay Granger, it's like, nepotism and incompetence and old age wrapped up into a burrito. There it is. There's your meal, folks. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's one thing that I hear from some of the Fort Worth establishment that they're going to support Kay because she's chairwoman of appropriations. And I say, well, first of all, good luck with that. I mean, here we are coming up quickly to the end of the fiscal year, and how many budget bills have we gotten passed through? So get ready. We're going to get a continuing resolution, and then there's going to be another omnibus bill. Mark my words. So as far as how functioning the Appropriations Committee is, what are they doing now? Well, now they're on their 6-week break. So clearly it's a real priority to them. The other thing, and you talked about it, is we keep saying that we love our kids and our grandkids. Well, then we need to start showing that through our actions. I don't care if she's chairwoman of appropriations. We don't need any more pork legislation for the area because we're broke. Ladies and gentlemen, we're rapidly going to $35 trillion in national debt, and we won't stop deficit spending. In fact, this budget debt ceiling crisis that we've passed, which Kay was a vote for, that Kevin McCarthy negotiated, not only as chairwoman of appropriations was she not involved in those negotiations, she actually shut down her office so that Kevin McCarthy had a clean deck to negotiate with the president. Look, going back to pre-COVID spending, is the only thing that makes sense. Those were emergency measures. So the fact that we're going back to 2022 spending levels for what? So that we can, provide funding for drag shows in Ecuador, which is a real thing, by the way. My Ecuadorian friends call me to thank me about that on a regular basis.
My Lord.
But it's where our national debt, just the interest alone on our national debt with the inflation that's going on and the Fed rate hikes that Chairman Powell are having to implement, pretty soon our interest payments alone on that national debt are going to rival our defense budget spending, which is monstrous to say the least. It's $800 billion, and that doesn't include the money that goes into NASA and the Department of Energy as well. And if you take a look at the next 9 highest military budgets in the world, they don't equate to that combined. Now, I'm all for a strong defense, and she's very pro-hawkish on defense spending, but our country's burning, and we're leaving our kids and our grandkids this debt to pay back. Because let's be honest, Rich, it's not going to be paid back by taxes from you and me in our life.
No, we can't grow our way out of this. We can't even cut our way out of this at this point. It's so big. Normally, well, not normally, 10 years ago, you could read a policy paper from Brookings, left wingers like Brookings, or right wingers like Heritage, and you could see, like the logic or even the math in somebody saying we got to cut and grow our way out of this. You could say that we're beyond that now, brother, well beyond that, and not for nothing, but your opponent has been a part of this. So, if you wonder why the budget process is completely collapsed, again, I'm not trying to attack the woman. I'm simply saying our budget process, the whole system, is in about as good a shape as her condition. We haven't had a legitimate budget process since John Kasich was the chairman, and she's been around that long. This is what the craziest thing about this is. She's been around that long. And here's the second thing to this. Even if you get rid of Joe Biden and the crazy Democratic majority that wants, and Republicans are no better at, and many of them, like you said, there wasn't much of an appetite on the Republican side to go back to pre-COVID spending levels. Let's be real.
Right.
So let's not let Republicans off the hook here. But and that's exactly my point. Even if Joe Biden is defeated and Donald Trump is ushered back in, if you do it with the same class of Republicans that you had in 16 and 17, you're going to end up in the same position. Kay Granger told Donald Trump she'd be there for him. There was, Putnam running against her in 2020. Trump doing what he always does, and to some extent, what people say about him being transactional is true, at least to some extent. You got to be there for me in this new impeachment sham, and I'll support you. And then she raced home and pretended she was sick. Maybe if she even was sick, who cares, John?
Right.
She could have voted no by proxy. Instead, she hid. She hid after giving the guy her word. She runs back to the district and hides, and then votes a dozen times by proxy that very session. So we're never, what I'm saying is the one man a revolution does not make. One man a major shift in policy will not make. You need to change the entire environment. Otherwise, it'll just be Trump and his supporters again, constantly being undermined by the legislative branch, and I'm not saying
by the Republicans.
By his own party. It's the role of the legislature to be adversarial. They're not supposed to roll over for the president, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about a president with earnest intentions, trying to do the right thing, being undermined every step of the way by his own corrupt party. And there's tons of comments. If you read it right now, if you go to whether it's YouTube, whether it's locals, whatever, wherever we're streaming right now, there are tons of comments about Republicans being hypocritical. You cannot make fun of Dianne Feinstein. You cannot make fun of Joe Biden. You cannot yell at Democrats for voting in somebody like John Fetterman and then vote for Kay Granger. You can't do it. It's called hypocrisy. So you want to mock John Fetterman because he can't speak? Folks, the woman is beyond retirement age, and she's not even doing her job. Let's get real. If she was, we would be in a more sound fiscal situation. But all of those people that you mentioned before, all they care about is the bacon being brought home back from the district by somebody in seniority. That's what they're really telling you, John. Not that you don't reflect their own policies better than her. Not that you wouldn't do a better job than her, but they want the bacon.
Yep. No, that's 100% it,
man.
Yeah, and look, the hypocrisy doesn't just extend to that. The hypocrisy extends to the fact that we are constantly voting for Republicans with an R behind their name who are anything but. If you take a look at Conservative Review, they mark everybody based on the actual legislation that they vote on, and they take a vote-by-vote count. Kay votes conservative only 51% of the time. That means 49% of the time she's voting with the Democrats. How is that a conservative Republican? Now, I understand that Fort Worth might be a little squish, a little bit establishment, but Fort Worth does not the entire district represent. This is a very America First district. It's a very conservative district. And since the Clinton administration, they don't have a congressperson who reflects their values. And that to me is hypocrisy. And the thing I'll tell you about this whole process that I've learned is that the consultants, they'll tell you, oh, when you speak to this group, you say this. When you're speaking to the primary race, you do this. And then immediately for the general, you pivot and you go to the middle. And it's like, no, why? That's lying. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to tell you who I am. I'm going to tell you I'm an America First Republican who is looking to run on very conservative values and platform because I think those policies have a better outcome for people. You want to show compassion? Don't virtue signal. Actually give people agency and then hold them accountable. That's the way that they take control of their lives and are able to form better and stronger families and provide for flourishing communities. We have anything but that right now. And it's time for all the charades to go away. You need to say who you are and let the voter actually make that determination, because you're right. We have one chance to get this right. So right now, we don't have time for these people who are going to tell you what they're going to do and then go ahead and betray that the first opportunity they have.
It's over after this. It's over. Right. It's over, folks. I really hate to be a doomsdayer, and I'm not a doomsdayer because I'm optimistic about the American public's wisdom to know when we're really at the end of the line, and you have got to do the right thing. Like I speak to them all the time. I speak to them every day. I do have that faith in them. So I'm not being a doomsdayer in that sense, but I am saying that if you are still in some way deluded about where we are right now, I'm here to tell you 2024 is it. They will run roughshod over us if they win this one, because then everything that they have done that's wrong will be affirmed. You'll have allowed it. This is why they're so emboldened now, because you allowed the Russia collusion hoax. You allowed it without any real accountability. I'm not going to get into it. I'll save that for an interview with RFK. But we've allowed a lot worse. And yet here we are. This is your district. You were talking about how America First this district is. And we see this all the time, everywhere. The donor class is way out of touch. And that's true even in Tarrant County in your district. So for those who don't know, Texas 12 is largely Tarrant County, about 70%, and then Parker, which is the rest of it. Parker is much more conservative than Tarrant County. If there is more traditionalist Republicans, you would think they are for sure in Tarrant County. And, polling we did backs that up. Overall, though, the district is majority America First. And ironically, because we know Trump actually wins the unsure, I'm not sure part of that question, the rest of them obviously are more America First. But, 55.4% said they were when you're looking at high school or less, and it is a more educated area. But about 62% of those who have a high school degree or less are America First, 59 who have some college or an associate's degree, even 51 who have a 4-year degree, and 47% who have an advanced post-grad. Look at Hispanics, and we were just talking about this in the first segment. Why is Trump thumping Ron DeSantis in his own state among Hispanics? The New York Times poll has Trump beating him like 68-12 among Hispanics. 83% of them said that they were America First. And by the way, more of them intend to vote in the primary this year. But look at Tarrant County, 54.6% compared to Parker, which is 57.2%. The truth is, more rural areas are more America First than the urban areas, but no matter what, it's still an America First district, and it doesn't have America First representation, right?
No.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, in fact, I visited with somebody the other day who was a Kay supporter, and at the end of the day, I said, well, I think she's had 28 years. Will have had 28 years to get whatever across the goal line she wanted. I think 28's enough. And this woman told me, well, I don't think, it matters how long. It matters what you've done this year. And I said, on that, we couldn't agree more. Because if you take a look at the votes that she's made just this year alone, they've infuriated the base. She voted to support the Department of Education against Thomas Massey's motion. She voted the first time not to censor Adam Schiff. She voted to approve and fully fund the FBI budget, including a brand new headquarters in D.C., which is something that clearly they should be rewarded with. I mean, she voted for the debt ceiling hike. I mean, she is not representing the actual values of the people here in Tarrant and Parker County. And it's time to get somebody in who actually is going to represent them, and somebody who's willing to go put their political lifeline out there, because they're not afraid about getting reelected. They're not afraid about building some career or becoming a lobbyist afterwards. They're just looking forward to getting back to their life, but they want to make sure that the life that they hand off to their kids and their grandkids is the right one. And the only way we can do that, as you said, they're not after President Trump. They're not after Ken Paxton. They're after us. Those two just happen to be in the way. Well, we need people who are willing to run interference for them to do the right thing. The impeachment vote on Ken was 60 votes were Republican legislators. And in fact, the Speaker of the House, Dade Phelan, he's a Republican. And he engineered this thing in collaboration with Merrick Garland, because you had somebody leave the Department of Justice, come down and secretly start the investigation for the House, hired 2 U.S. attorneys out of Houston were Democrats. So, I mean, you don't need anything more transparent. In fact, the impeachment against Ken is actually against Texas code. There is a code that says an elected official cannot be impeached for anything that took place prior to the election that was known to the public. Well, guess what? All the facts surrounding this controversy that they're trying to drum up into something that it's not, it was all known. Trust me, George P. Bush, who was running against Ken in the primary, was sending constant smear mailers out. And the media were trumpeting it all the time, saying that Ken was under indictment, that Ken, had committed these acts and wasn't fit for office. And the voters of Texas disagreed. Nearly 4 million people came out, and Ken won in a landslide. And so they're trying to, just like they did with President Trump's first the whole Russia hoax tried to neuter his presidency before it even began, and then the Ukraine gate, and then this January 6th impeachment, and now all this lawfare. They're just trying to take him off the board. They don't care what the American voter wants, and that's just wrong. I mean, it's illicit, it's corrupt and illicit, and I don't understand illicit. Maybe it should be a new word, but I don't understand how they think that they have a say over who we get to elect.
Yeah. That's what this comes down to. And you said something before, which I want to bring up on the screen before I get to your article. You had a great article on Town Hall about this. You said, leaving the country better for the grandkids, or even in a secure position. I don't think it's even possible at this point to leave it in a better situation than my grandfather gave it to me. I think he gave me the most power. He left me in the most powerful nation on the earth as ever seen ever, and one that was so secure in its superpower status, people were declaring an end to history over it. I mean, but this is the saddest thing about it. So here you have the largest number of support. And of course, you obviously have to do well with older voters in a primary because they vote in a primary. But in your district, overwhelmingly, it's, you have that big chunk of 65 to 74 and then 45 to 64. They're far more America First. The only age group that is more traditional Republican than America First is the super seniors, over 75 years old. And yet they're not the ones who are going to have to deal with the calamity that's left behind from this, go along to get along mentality where, Kay Granger is representing that tiny little percent of your district, while the rest of us, who are going to have to live with the consequences, are not being represented. And, with that in mind, I do want to bring this up because for those who didn't read it, John wrote an incredible article on Town Hall. I'm actually going to put it up. You brought that up, by the way, too, about the election. People knew this. George Bush, or P. Bush, put out, and by the way, he even had an attack from his so-called right in the judge, I'm forgetting his name already, because Gomer, he's a representative, but he was a judge, who gave up his seat to do this. And it was just constant from Louis Gomer on War Room, everything, constantly trying to get people to turn on Ken Paxton. It did not happen. It didn't happen. So as you say, I want to read this because there's a lot of great stuff, and I'll share the link in the comment section so people can read it. But the end, it goes like this. Nothing like this has ever happened in the history of this state. Speaker Phelan just decided to suppress the vote of nearly 4 million Texans. The matter is now in the hands of the Texas Senate, which is comprised of 19 Republicans and 12 Democrats. The average Texan is outraged at this sham impeachment and miscarriage of justice. And yet, just as with President Trump, it appears that the political establishment has no concern for voter sentiment and are only concerned with removing political rivals from the board. So I would glance from that from how you ended that article, John, that you don't have a great deal of confidence in how this process is going to turn out, the outcome of this.
Honestly, the Senate is much more conservative than the House. They actually represent Texas values more. And frankly, our Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, is a good man. And I think will do the right thing in conducting a fair hearing for, whether or not the impeachment's passed or not. But the fact that it even got to this stage, because the whole process was a sham. It was an investigation in secret. There was no new evidence proffered. The whole, predicate for the impeachment itself was the fact that Ken settled the case from the whistleblowers who had sued the Attorney General's office. Well, guess what? Ken settles cases on behalf of the state of Texas all the time. In fact, normally he's bringing money into the state. Speaker Phelan said, well, he just cost the Texas taxpayers $3.2 million. You care to guess? I would love to see a Freedom of Information Act request to see exactly how much Speaker Phelan has spent on this investigation in this impeachment hearings. I guarantee you it dwarfs the $3.2 million settlement amount.
Oh, yeah.
So, these people who always complain, and normally it comes from the left, but about voter suppression, because they say things like, well, it's racist to make people present an ID, or signature verification is voter suppression. In these situations where you're literally trying to tell the American people or the people of Texas that your vote didn't matter, that you don't get to say in who actually represents you in these offices, that to me is just prima facie voter suppression. and yet nobody calls it for what it is.
Oh, that's such a good point. Such a good point. They just, who cares? You know, I mean, they lose an election. Let's face it. They put up their boy Bush. They even, you know, I don't know what Gohmert was thinking, but this is a major
Have to ask
problem.
Karl Rove.
Yeah, no, seriously. This is a major problem with the right. There are too many people on the right who are willing to play the role of stooge. All right, we got one right now. His name is the Florida governor. All right, I mean, they are willing to play the role of stooge in order to hurt their own supposed party. And they, you know, I know it's easy to stroke people's egos, John, but this has got to stop because the left doesn't do this. The left does not do this. For them, first of all, the cause comes before their principles because they don't really have principles. They just shift every time the cause needs it to shift. Right. They'll shift with it. I mean, that's what a true ideology is. Conservatives don't really have that. They have beliefs. You know, there's a difference between an ideology and like a way of life and like, you know, principles that you live by, and you bring those principles into what, you know, your public life if you have them. The fact is, like you said, and I had it up before, but I'll put it up again. You know, this is the same. It's like musical chairs, man. It's like musical chairs. The settlement, 3.3 million, was reached, and Phelan claims that was really predicate enough. But without the public's knowledge, unbeknownst to the public, the Texas House was conducting a general investigating committee hearing on Paxton's impeachment behind closed doors. Here we have an election out in the open. He wins it in a landslide. And then they decide they could just do this behind closed doors. The committee was comprised of 5 investigators with ties to Merrick Garland and the Biden administration. The secretive hearings were held without witnesses under oath, and the Attorney General's office was not allowed to rebut, present evidence, or submit the outside independent report on the matter. And then after a 4-hour debate on the House floor with no new evidence being brought forward, the House voted to impeach Attorney General Paxton. There's so much in there to unpack. The fact that really there was no new evidence, and that's an obscure law. I don't really know. I think that a lot of people know that what you said before, which is that it had to be something new. I mean, it was an election that had just happened. But again, this happened to Trump. The inability to defend yourself before they do this, before it's just a kangaroo court. You're not allowed to defend yourself. Like, impeachment hearings are political by nature. Yeah, but of course they're supposed to be built off of the same principles that we built everything else in our society. The presumption of innocence, right? The right to face your accusers. None of that. When they're trying to take out their political opponents, none of that is afforded. And that should terrify everybody, no matter what their, you know, what party affiliation is after their last name, whatever they consider themselves ideologically. And that should scare the hell out of everybody. And yes, there are furniture ads because they're trying to get me to pull the trigger on another Bollywood order. People are like, clear your cat, Stretch. I don't care. I know what they're trying to do. I went and looked at outdoor furniture. So that's going to be on there for weeks until I finally get it. So, you know, that's the world we live in, folks. I deal with big data every day. I get it. Believe me. So, yeah, I mean, I think that so much is at stake. And here again, I'm sad to say, I mean, it's saddens me to say it, but it's time for us to have a more blunt conversation. Really, the same forces at work here to derail Ken Paxton are the same forces at work that are trying to nominate somebody else other than Donald Trump. They are. And they're even willing to deal with the Democratic administration who uses lawfare to do it.
Look at Arizona. I mean, you know, the election officials in Maricopa County were Republicans, and clearly they were doing everything they could to undermine Kari Lake. Those voting machines worked fine during the early voting period, were certified before game day voting, and then all of a sudden the settings were mysteriously changed in the dead of the night so that the readers wouldn't read the ballots because they were off. It was 19-inch paper versus a 20-inch scan or whatever the circumstances were. I mean, those were Republicans who did it. And I know you had shared a tweet showing that they had voter efficacy maps in the office showing where the Republican vote turnout was going to be. Well, that's kind of odd. Why were they so concerned about that? I'm tired of playing pretend. I'm tired of playing make-believe. You know, the things are what they are. We have a corrupt, bought-off president in the White House. We have a corrupt legislature here in Texas that received their money from PACs and from special interest in the donor class and don't listen to the will of the people. We have a governor in Florida who had his ego stroked by the donor class, who were told that lawfare was going to bring down President Trump. And instead, it's just emboldened him further, and it's shown more evidence to the people that he has the resolve and what it takes to actually do the job this time when he pulls his Grover Cleveland. And frankly, I'm tired of pretending that Kay actually represents the voters here in Texas 12, that she would have President Trump's back. I mean, she didn't even support him when he won the primary in 2016. So, what makes you think that all of a sudden she's going to have a change of heart after 28 years? She's been in office since the Clinton administration. If she was going to get anything done, her time has come and gone. It is time for us to take this country back. We need more brave America First patriots like the Eli Cranes, like the Keith Selfs, like the Anna Paulina Lunas, who actually stood up to Speaker McCarthy and held his feet to the fire and got those rules for the House and Congress changed back, and now have a bayonet to the back with these oversight committee hearings. Because frankly, these squish Republicans only do things if they're forced to. They don't have the moral fortitude or the spine to do what's right and necessary to save this country. And we don't have time to play games anymore. It's now or never.
Well said. Well said. And by the way, great example of that was California. They were going to change the rules to try to screw this guy, and they had no appetite to so-called Trump allies had no appetite to fight that effort with Jessica Patterson, which is Kevin McCarthy's right-hand girl. They had no effort until people like me embarrassed them publicly and just abuse them for, me, Barnes, Laura Loomer, who they can mock all they want, but she's been extremely effective. If it wasn't, for these voices, they would have changed those rules. And by the way, they're trying to do it in Massachusetts as well. John, where can people follow you? I can't stress people enough. If you support the president and his agenda, it's not going to work if you don't have people in office who support him. It's going to be the same damn thing all over again. Kay Granger just threw him to the wolves in 2016. Threw him to the wolves. She's not doing a damn thing. She hasn't said as far as I know, she hasn't said anything about what's going on with Ken. Right?
No, they're not political allies for sure.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
So Ken made the right decision in backing you. Period.
Yeah, well, he's a longtime friend. And in fact, I've been sitting on that endorsement for a while because I didn't want to be a distraction for him. But it came to a point where I felt like I needed to come out publicly and show my support of Ken in light of these allegations. But yeah, if people could follow me.
Let me just stop.
Sure.
That says so much about you, because I can testify to that the truth is you have known Ken for years. You've been friends for years. And, you didn't want to be a distraction with everything that was going on. The fact, though, that you are choosing to stand with him right now, by the way, this is his time of need. So he stood with the Trump administration. He stood with all the voters. If it wasn't for Ken Paxton, half of Donald Trump's immigration agenda would have failed. It would have failed. Yeah. I can't even list the number of, lawsuits that Ken brought, making sure that it ended up in the right district. This guy has been a warrior.
Hey, look, just in 2020 alone,
that
he had 12 cases that went to the state Supreme Court over mail-in balloting. And had he not gone 12-0, Texas would have gone the way of Georgia, and we would have possibly lost the 2020 election through Texas as well. So yeah, Ken's a warrior who's been there for the people of Texas and the people of the country in challenging the Obama and the Biden administrations. Well, frankly, it's just a continuation of Obama's third term. But he's been there for the people, and it's time that we, the people, take a stand and have his back. And in fact, if you want to know what kind of congressman I would be, just take a look at how I'm backing and supporting my friend Ken Paxton. This is exactly the same kind of resolve that I would show in the face of attacks. And oh, by the way, not so withering coming from the Democrats, but coming from the establishment Republicans who are already levying personal attacks. But this is how I would stand with President Trump. So if an America First, God-fearing patriot candidate appeals to you, please go to my website, www.o'sheafortexas, the number 4, o'sheafortexas.com. All my social media links are there, my endorsements, ways that you can volunteer and help. I am taking on a 14-term incumbent who is chairwoman of appropriations and is very much embedded in the establishment. She is not fundraising from the individual people here well, but she's got all the lobbyist money she can say grace over.
Yeah.
I'm not taking that money. I'm not going to be beholden to any special interest group. I'm going to be beholden to the voter. I serve God, and because I serve God, that means I serve my brothers and sisters. I'm not serving special interests. I'm there to win this country back and return it to we the people, so that then I know when I depart this mortal coil, I can go meet my maker and hear, well done, good and faithful servant. And know I left behind a country that was a beacon of liberty and freedom for my kids and my grandkids' future.
Amen. Listen, let me just finish my thought real quick. What I was saying is,
Oh,
you know,
sure.
it says the world of your character that you would most, you know, come out and, you know, the article, a lot of people I can see, you know, somebody said must read. It is, go read it, but it says everything about you, John, that you're willing to do that now. You know, fair weather friends are what politics is sadly all about, and you are most certainly not a fair weather friend. So it says everything about what kind of congressman you would be. And frankly, she's on freaking borrowed time and should have been gone a while ago. But things happen for a reason.
Yep.
And I'd rather, no offense to Mr. Putnam, I think that you know, I think you would do a great job. So maybe things do happen for a reason. Is my point, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I look forward to helping Congresswoman Granger spend more time with her family.
That's right. Two things you and I have to do together next time you come on. One,
Okay.
got to tell the prayer beat story. And number two, you know, maybe I'll just do this even before you come back on. But I mean, a world without Ken Paxton. What would it look like without Ken? It's been, what is it? It's 2024. He's been at this since the Obama administration.
Right.
Somebody should paint a picture about what everything would look like right now without Attorney General Ken Paxton. Somebody should do that.
Yeah.
Like a
Well,
Christmas
yeah,
carol.
no, that's a really good point. I mean, the
Family
Texas
Guy.
Attorney General's office is one of the best funded attorney general's offices in the country. And so, in fact, other red state AGs actually look towards Ken and his office to initiate some of these suits, and then they sign on as friends and amicus briefs. But yeah, the country would be in much, much worse shape if that's difficult to imagine. If it weren't for Ken being that
Oh,
watchman on
God.
the wall, we need more people to get his back so that he can get back to where he's needed.
Yeah, the same. Yeah, that's well put. I'll just leave it there. John, thanks for coming back on. Come back and see us soon. Best of luck to you, and do what you got to do, brother. Do what you
Pleasure
got
as
to do.
always. All my love to Laura.
All right, give everybody our best. See
Okay.
you soon,
Thanks,
brother.
Rich. Uh-huh.
John O'Shea, ladies and gentlemen. John O'Shea. Listen, the lines have been drawn. Putnam would have beat her, and you know, you can't blame Trump for it because he's got to try to secure his thing. But the truth is, Putnam would have beat her. He was ahead, and then Trump endorsed her with the explicit, obviously believed that she would be defending him with impeachment. She did not. She ran away. And then, you know, I'm sick. And unfortunately, I know it. I've seen it. I've been on I say it all the time, but there's no other nice. There's no nice way to put it. I've been on the wrong end. I'll say it like that so Laura doesn't get mad. I've been on the wrong end of a Trump endorsement, and you just watch your numbers collapse. I mean, it happens quickly. It's usually 48, 72 hours. You're done. You know, so the fact that Putnam still even got over 40% against Kay Granger was, to me, in my mind, that's a lot of voters who are saying we understand why you endorsed her, Mr. President, but you know, with all due respect, we're going to vote for somebody else. Tons of them. This one is going to be a heavy turnout primary. The voters in the 12th district are going to vote, and I've not seen. I remember our old friend Don. He told me, he's like, this is a place I've lived all over, you know, that the Midwest, Florida. He's like, people are like engaged here. And you know, we always ask screening questions. Those voters were super, super engaged. And there was pretty big turnout in 2020 for a primary. Normally, she doesn't have to deal with any real primary challenges. So turnout is very low. I think this time you're going to see higher turnout than you even saw when Putnam challenged her in 2020. And that obviously is going to benefit John because she needs low turnout and no MAGA and no challenge to hold on. This time is going to be different. And not for nothing, but I don't know what the president's doing. Can we just have a second here? Like, I don't know what he's doing. Trying not to make waves, dealing with lawfare. I don't know. But if you don't have a Andrew Jackson-like approach to your comeback, you're going to end up entrenched with your own damn party again. You cannot have the Kay Grangers of the world. You gave Tom McClintock's another one. You give Tom McClintock your endorsement. What does he do? He shakes off Nathan Magzik with your endorsement and then stabs you in the back. You need to make sure you have your own people who represent the voters and your agenda. Otherwise, you're just going to, you cannot spend all of your time fighting your own damn party. They screwed Reagan. They betrayed Reagan. There wouldn't even be a Department of Education right now if it wasn't for those traitors. And by the way, Kay Granger, John brought it up. So what kind of conservative votes against, and I don't know, agree with Thomas Massey, but the education bill, the Department of Education bill was textbook Republicanism. Whether you're America First or you're a traditional Republican, that's textbook, so-called textbook Republicanism. And she voted against it, 1 of 4. She apparently doesn't think that there should be accountability with Ukraine spending either. I don't know what kind of Republican votes like that. And John's being nice, talking about her conservative score or conservative review score. He's a candidate. That's what he has to be. I'm saying that you cannot make fun of John Fetterman and Joe Biden and keep sending people like Kay Granger back to Congress. Even California Democrats are willing to send Feinstein home because she's just not mentally capable of doing her job anymore. Thank you for your service, Mrs. Feinstein, Senator Feinstein. Thank you for your service, but it's time for you to pack it up. Even Democrats are saying that to a legend like Dianne Feinstein. And she is a legend, whether you agree with her or not. Now, they might replace her with a corrupt piece of shit like Adam Schiff, but at least he's still functional and cognitive. Pee Wee Herman died? What? When did Pee Wee Herman die? Man, I had the Pee Wee Herman doll when I was a kid. You guys remember the Pee Wee Herman doll? I digress. You remember that, Jonathan? Jonathan knows. Big old long legs and arms. Probably was not as big as I remember it because I was little. Probably felt bigger to me. Oh, man. Remember that as a movie, Jay. It's like the movie came out and then we all got the dolls. And it was like the Pee Wee Herman doll. I can't even do it. Oh, man, that stinks. That's a shame. That is a shame. Check out John's article if you haven't already. Let's take a real quick commercial break. We could go over more of the polling, and that I polled that district. I polled the state of Texas. I just cannot believe, I honestly think that traditional Republicans could lose the state of Texas. I do. There's more and more. You're not going to stop the bleeding of the college white vote. You need to add Hispanics in the Rio Grande and southern south and southwest southeast to southwest Texas. And Republicans got crushed. Not Ken Paxton, however. Wait a minute. Not Ken Paxton. The candidates for Congress got their butts whipped, but not Ken Paxton. Not there. I wonder why. He's such a toughie on immigration. I thought they wanted an open border. What a crock. They didn't believe, even though Republicans posted a bunch of Hispanic candidates too, they still didn't believe them like they believe a billionaire from Manhattan, a billionaire white guy from Manhattan, and a white dude who's the attorney general. Did you find that a little funny? So insulting. My wife's Hispanic. You think she just votes for people because they're Hispanic? Because their last name resembles her maiden name? That's hell to the no, she just said in the other room. That's insulting. It's racist. That's a racist statement, Adam. Racist statement. And I didn't know he had cancer. I really didn't know that. Sorry to hear that. Guy was good for a lot of laughs, you know? And I know it was weird and there was like questions over him at some point. I never believed him. And I'll tell you what, I just don't like that anyway. And I don't want to hear them now that he's dead. I don't want to see people tweeting about it or, it's like so easy to attack somebody when they're dead and can't defend themselves. I hate that. That documentary about Michael Jackson, I don't know whether it's true or not, but I will tell you this. You don't come out with it after a guy is dead and can't defend himself anymore. Why didn't you come out before? Boy, somebody sent me a clip too of Mike Tyson when he was young, 15. The fight was over in like 6 seconds. I mean, it looked so familiar. They were talking about it. They sent it to me because of my interview with Eric and Mark on Friday. I'll never forget that. Talk about scaring a kid. Bring him to a Tyson fight when he's like 8. I forgot how old I was. I was probably older than 8, but man, never forget that. The sound of the I can't even do it with the desk. The sound of the ring when he hit these guys. It's crazy. He was just a monster. All right, let's take a real quick break. When we come back, we'll talk more about everything else we want to talk about. You're watching Inside the Numbers. And don't forget, which we will put up soon anyway, that if you're going to sign up for locals, I'll tell you about it in a second. You better do it now. But for right now, look, folks, authorities do fear that extremists are targeting the power grid. They do. That's according to Time magazine. If just 9 key substations would go down, it would knock out power across the country for up to 18 months. That's why, like Laura and I, you need a solar generator. The new Patriot Power Generator 2000X is portable, but it's still powerful enough for your phones, even medical devices, even your refrigerator. Right now, you can go to 4patriots.com and get one for 10% off if you use the promo code TPP10 at checkout. This code works for everything, but it's for your first purchase only, so make it a big one. Make it one that counts. That's 4patriots.com. Use the code TPP10 and get yourself a Patriot Power Generator 2000X today. And there are fantastic deals right there where you can look and great deals to add to panels and everything. Even though we have a natural gas generator, you still need a solar. Make sure you have your family's back covered. 4patriots.com, promo code TPP10. And before we get to our regular scheduled program, let's talk about starting a new subscription with our friends at Jam and Bean. Patriot owned, of course, but they're also magnificent, as all of your feedback has shown. Always send us your feedback. We love it. Read their story right there. You will absolutely come to appreciate them like we have. But whether you are someone like me, I like K-Cups, I like freshly ground coffee, I like it all. If I have the time, I'd rather get fresh roasted and then grind it myself. There's nothing like it. But sometimes I just don't have the time. So I'm really appreciative that they have a real full medium-bodied K-Cup like nobody else has. You go to the store right now and you grab some Starbucks and it says medium bodied. It's not. It's really just dark roast with less in it and probably some styrofoam like wafer that I'm sure you're not really supposed to be ingesting with hot water. It's probably not very good for you. Not at Jam and Bean. Visit our friends at Jam and Bean. Check out their gourmet popcorn. Check out their incredible line of different flavors of coffee and teas. And their maple syrup is delicious too. Start a new subscription at Jam and Bean right now. Use the promo code TPP40 and you will get 40% off right off the bat. And you'll still get 10% off when your subscription renews next month. Again, that's Jam and Bean, JAMN Bean.com. Use the promo code TPP40 to get yourself 40% off your initial subscription and still 10% on every subsequent renewal. By the way, these guys were COVID champions. Help support them today. All right, let's get back to it. Yeah, I mean, I could pull that clip up, actually. I mean, I don't know. It's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. So maybe everyone doesn't want to see it. Okay. I don't know if I want to raise anyone's profile by specifically citing them, but I want to talk a little bit more about these demographic shifts that obviously are going to trump in the polling especially when we're talking about young and non-white people. However, the truth is there has been evidence that there has been an opportunity with younger people for Republicans for a while. They just haven't been very good and capable of grabbing onto it. And that's probably because while a lot of these, especially men, and it mostly, I'll be honest, mostly comes from younger men. The reason why is probably because the party is still in this weird kind of identity crisis that doesn't know who they are, what they are, what they support, what they believe. The leaders that they put forward, they are always, fighting with each other. So you just can't have that kind of infighting and identity crisis and consolidate and coalition as much as you really need to. We have been talking a lot about, for instance, Iowa, Ohio, the states that Trump wins, and he wins them overwhelmingly. If you go and you look at the exit polls and other, it's really pre-election polls will show you even, Trump wins every single age group in these states and has since 2016. They go back to being battleground states because Republicans, typical Republicans, anyone not named Donald Trump can only win older voters or, middle-aged working voters and up, but they get crushed with younger people. And you just can't do that. If you want to make sure that if you want to carry the state by 8 or 10 points, you better do better with younger people. And Trump even carried young females in a state like Iowa in 2016. There was a study out. This is why I also bring back what I had said in the first segment about the turning point and war room power in a Republican primary. All right. Somebody like Turning Point, an organization like Turning Point, has spent a lot of money. Hold on. I don't care about the video. They have spent a lot of money on reaching out to high school kids that are about to be involved in the electorate, even more so in the last few years than they have spent on colleges. And in fact, I asked Charlie about this. And I didn't ask, we were talking about it. And he said, Turning Point USA has more high school chapters than college chapters. We have been pouring investments into high schools for a few years, and the data is showing that our focus is paying off. It's huge. And I said, it's massive, Charlie, massive. So I want to read this and go into, so I could play this, guys. Maybe I will play it and then I'll read it myself. Okay. Let's
joining us now to discuss this further is staff
right, I'm gonna go back.
Hill, Daniel DeVis.
Here we go. So let's
12th grade boys are nearly twice as likely to identify as conservative versus liberal. This is according to recent research from the Monitoring the Future survey. Since as recently as the late 2000s, boys who identified as liberal occasionally outnumbered those who said they were conservative.
Sorry, look at that trend now. I also just want to point out before I let this play, this survey's been going for years. Monitoring the Future survey from the University of Michigan has been around for a long time. We are not talking about somebody who just dipped their feet into this, folks. They've been at this for a long time. You can even see in the 90s, all right? And I don't mean to stop this here, but really it was during the Obama era or the beginning, the advent of the Obama era, that Republicans started losing younger people. Throughout the 90s, a lot of them were always especially white young boys, were calling themselves more right-leaning, but a lot of them went to like the Ross Perot and Reform Coalition. And then George W. Bush brought them back and did better with younger Asians and younger whites than people expected that he would do. All right. Then, especially women, they lost during the Obama era. This is only of boys. And look at the explosion in the Trump era. Look at the explosion in the Trump era. He arrested the downward trend. It was coming pre-Trump. After Mitt Romney got his butt kicked and handed it off to the next generation, remember 17 candidates vied for that nomination. He arrested the upward trend. He stopped it from liberal identification. Or not he, but it stopped at the advent of America First. And the declining trend was arrested and reversed. Both got a momentary bump up, yet in the Trump era, liberal identification among young boys collapsed and conservative continued to increase. If you can't see that, then I don't know how. And, I don't want to raise anyone's profile, but more than a few people have sent me a number of threads from a certain particular so-called right-wing pollster who supports DeSantis, talking about how this is just nonsense. Trump is doing so well with these kids. No, he's not. It's not nonsense. He is doing well with them. So here we go. Let's listen to the rest of this.
Back in the Carter era, both boys and girls leaned liberal.
Now, girls of the same cohort overwhelmingly identify as liberal. The share of 12th grade girls who identified as liberal rose from 19% in 2012 to 30% in 2022. Only 12% of girls identified as conservative in last year's survey.
But stop. Here's the deal. Look at the rest of the trend. So if you're like, oh, well, Richie loses all these women. They're going anyway. The truth is, there was never any real loss. Young women have always identified as liberal. And while that has exacerbated somewhat, I would rather see that trend more naturally continue, but men reverse. What I'm proposing is they would not have without the advent of the America First movement. And all you would get is a more liberal female young cohort and a male that's, hit or miss at best. You needed the men to offset what has always happened with women. Look at the 90s. Again, when young boys were actually identifying more as conservative, women were not. They went the other way. You can see during the Obama era, they spiked. Started collapsing with conservatives. They ticked up here a little bit. America First comes along. It declines with conservative identification, but it's still higher than it was during the Carter era. Hell, it's basically on par with where it was during the Reagan era. Let's continue.
However, in the 2022 Monitoring the Future survey, the largest group of senior boys, more than 2/5, claim no politics at all, answering the liberal conservative question with none of the above or I don't know. Nearly 1/5 identified as moderate. Joining us now.
Now, though, hold on, because that is a danger sign for traditional Republicans. So the bottom line is where these young independent, and by the way, women too, in Ohio and Iowa, even Wisconsin, if you look at the exit polling from 2016 and 2020, would they vote for anyone other than a Trump or they're not voting Republican. They are voting for Trump at the top of the ticket. So where would these moderates or no identifications go? I mean, it's safe to say like the Ben Shapiro's of the world aren't having much of an impact, folks.
Now to discuss this further is staff writer for The Hill, Daniel DeVisse. Welcome, Daniel.
Hey, good to be here.
And honestly, I'm not sure I care all that much about anyone's punditry. All right, let's just read this. A popular narrative suggests young people are liberal and getting more liberal. Thus, social media buzzed when a chart surfaced in spring that seemed to suggest 12th grade boys had become overwhelmingly conservative. As with many Reddit posts and viral tweets, the truth was more complicated. It always is. But the numbers do say this. 12th grade boys are nearly twice as likely to identify as conservative versus liberal, according to a respected federal survey of American youth. In annual surveys over the last 3 years, roughly 1/4 of high school seniors self-identified as conservative or very conservative on the Monitoring the Future survey. A scholarly endeavor that dates to the 70s. Only 13% of boys identified as liberal or very liberal in those years. Folks, it's important to realize, well, I don't want to get into that. I'm going to leave that out. But the identification with gender has been so crazy and so messed up. The results of this are rather astonishing. The figures represent a striking shift in the political views of boys. As recently as the late 2000s, liberal boys occasionally outnumbered conservatives. Back in the Carter era, both boys and girls leaned liberal. Nowadays, it is girls who are drifting to the left. The share of 12th grade girls who identified as liberal rose from 19% in 2012 to 30% in 2022. Only 12% of girls identified as conservative in last year's survey, administered by the University of Michigan. Political identities of 12th grade girls are here. Young women, too, are trending liberal. Women ages 18 to 29 are more likely to identify as liberal now than at any time in the past 2 decades, according to Gallup surveys. Young women are almost twice as likely as young men to claim the liberal tag, a widening gender gap in political beliefs. The political leanings of young men have changed little over the past 2 decades, according to analysis of the Survey Center on American Life. Last year, 43% of young men identified as moderate, 31% as conservative, 24% as liberal. That's almost identical, by the way, to it's a little less conservative than the nation as a whole. 20 years later, the numbers were more or less the same. But the leftward drift of young women alone has sufficed to move the needle on young adults as a whole. Generation Z favors liberalism over conservatism by a 48 to 33 margin. That's actually not that big, according to NBC News polling from 2022. 10 years earlier, they were split evenly between the two camps. Yeah, because the Romney era just killed us. It's killed us. The rightward drift of high school boys is comparatively subtle. Indeed, when it comes to politics, most boys seem reluctant to pick a side. And that is a big deal. That sector of the electorate is the one I think we're most concerned with at this point. Because that is what, by the way, Big Village just came out with they're doing a monthly survey now. They found the same thing. And Trump actually increased a little bit with these young guys since the last month's survey. Biden ticked down from 36 to 34. Yet when you put them up against Ron DeSantis, DeSantis loses them by 2 points. Why? It's like if you have a just regular Republican politician, they can't win these kids. They can't win these groups. It's like this is just one of many groups that we have tried to focus on. They're not appealing to them. They're just not. The rightward drift is more comparative. I don't understand that question, Laura, but I mean, it is a Monday, so I don't know what you mean. Between you and David, you're like throwing me all around. Oh my God. I'm actually glad David sent that. We're going to talk about this. We're going to read this Axios report. This actually breaks my heart. This breaks my heart. DeSantis' super PAC will report almost half of the spending went to Jeffro. $400,000 in travel costs alone. It's disgusting. Disgusting. $344,000 on private jet travel? Holy moly. And they sent $92 million to a COVID relief fund donor. Mr. Anti-Fauci, Laura. What a crock. Jean Twang, an author and professor of psychology at San Diego State University, presented the data in her new book, Generations, to spotlight the growing gender gap. She couched the numbers in a chart that split boys and girls along ideological line, omitting moderates and the undecided. Among liberals, the future is female, she wrote. Among conservatives, the future is male. That is a very simplistic thing that psychologists like her have been writing forever. Meanwhile, the truth is much more complicated. As women, just anybody else, as women get older, they get more conservative. They do not stay as liberal. For crying out loud, the most liberal generation of the 1960s is now the most conservative voting bloc in the electorate. That simply is not true. Somebody want to quote Churchill for me? People know. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Churchill said, if you're not a liberal when you're young, you don't have a heart. If you're not a conservative when you get older, you don't have a brain. So that's a little bit more too simplistic. All right, I got to stop this and just go to this other report. I got to, because what a grift. I'm sorry. It's just a grift. This is so sad. What a waste of money. And on Saturday, in his speech in Erie, by the way, we got to get Sean Parnell back on. He did a great job in that speech. He gets his state. He told a story that I think people should go back and listen if you haven't seen it. And it's about courage and loyalty. And only somebody like Sean, I understand where he's coming from. And I told him during his interview of me, I said, that's the army in you, Sean. That's the army in you. But in any event, during this, they basically called on other candidates to just drop out and stop wasting millions, hundreds of millions in donor money to try to beat someone the majority has clearly picked already. and instead use that money to get out the vote. But they don't want to do that because they would rather Trump lose so they can later say, I told you so. David Giglio has been right about this for a lot. He talks to these guys all the time. They will claim poor. They will spend all their money on trying to support DeSantis and Tim Scott or whoever else, and then they will cry being poor when it's time to actually spend it on defeating Joe Biden. That is what they will do. I love it. I love it. Oh, I did during the commercial break forget to say this, and I'm going to say it again because it's the last day. So I'm sorry if I'm beating a dead horse here, guys. But the bottom line is this is the last day to join the People's Pundit community before the price change goes into effect. If you're going to do it today. All right. If you are a monthly supporter, now is the time to get an annual subscription and save yourself some money. Just pay it up front. If you are not a supporter yet and you're a member and you've been on the locals community for a while, today is the last day to jump on there before you go to $7. All right. Everyone's done this with their locals communities. We have a lot of very high priced data stuff we're bringing you guys. We're going to pull Florida again soon, by the way, regardless of what the Public Polling Project does. Now is the day to join locals. And I need Laura, you got to remind me to hit Twitter and Getter and Truth with this, okay? Don't let me forget to put this out one more time today. Now is the day to do it. All right, so I don't want to. Let me just say, I hate to see you guys pay even $2 more if you don't have to. Washington Post: DeSantis' super PAC relies heavily on $1 million donors, and this is why I have told you guys that the situation for the DeSantis campaign is far more dire than you're being told. All right. He can't raise low dollar contributions. It's not happening. He has no grassroots support. So when the mega donors turned on him, he decided, I'm going to go to the regular donor class, which is I will meet you at a fundraiser for $6,600 a plate. It's not super mega donor stuff, but it is, they'll max contribute. The Hamptons last weekend, they had one in the Southamptons, maybe both were in Southampton. Didn't matter. Doesn't matter. They had to be canceled for a lack of interest, even though he pulled the DeSantis discount. He reduced the number of plates. He reduced the cost per plate from $6,600 to $3,300. They had to cancel them for lack of interest. So he can't even get those donors anymore. That leaves you with mega donor contributions to your PAC, which, by the way, they really need to be careful because they are breaking the law. All right. You cannot have Jeff Rowe, campaign people in the same room talking to donors about strategy. The super PAC can literally not be in the same room with the campaign talking to donors about strategy and about finances and polling and sharing this and doing that and talking about how you're going to coordinate the walkers with the PAC, right? So the campaign can just spend money on this, that, the other thing. You can't do that. That's illegal. A lot of Iowa Republicans have already been very concerned over they've been approached by the PAC in an attempt to pay people to be precinct captains during the caucuses. Nobody's ever tried to do anything like that before, and they were already walking a very fine line. Anyway, without being able to raise grassroots donations to your campaign or getting regular size donors to max out, then you're forced to rely on mega donors who give to the super PAC. But a PAC can't do everything a campaign needs to do, which is why he cut more people from his campaign that are actively on the payrolls in the Trump campaign right now. Just in the last week, more people have been fired that have ever worked for the Trump campaign. We're not talking about a shakeup here, folks. This is a collapse. And yes, there have been people who've retooled their campaign, restructured their campaign. This is not the same kind of thing. This is a big deal. And what the difference is with McCain and others is that he was able to sustain himself with some lower dollar people. That is not the case here. DeSantis is actually under Tim Scott, Vivek Ramaswamy, many, even Mike Pence and Chris Christie, as far as the percentage of money he's gotten from grassroots support. He's below even them. 17%. Trump's over 82. Never back down. A group supporting the Florida governor's 2024 presidential bid includes wealthy backers who used to support Donald Trump. That is true. And by the way, never back down. That's Ken Cuccinelli's whole gig and everything. They actually, everybody knows this now. This is not, they are supporting Florida governor, but that PAC doesn't belong to him. And they have been looking for another horse. It was in USA Today. Jack Sobek and I both knew it. And then it got reported by USA Today. They are trying to get other people. They're ready to jump ship on this guy. And if the PAC gets fractured and starts to help other people, he's done, folks. He's finished. And something Harry Enton and others did not bring up, and even the New York Times in their polling analysis did not bring up, there is a minimum threshold for many of these states. And at this point, after spending all of this money, they have fallen below the minimum thresholds to be qualified to receive delegates in many of these early states. Like, he's below the threshold in one poll in New Hampshire. He's right on it in most other polls. So he may or may not hit it considering the sampling error. And by the way, California, don't think I forgot about you. Incredible how some people are trying to take credit for it. If I didn't embarrass you for weeks, you would have changed the rules. Never back down. The outside group spending heavily to make Florida Governor Ron DeSantis president has raked in donations of $1 million or more from at least 7 wealthy Republican benefactors or their companies, according to internal documents from the group. It had nearly $97 million cash on hand at the end of June. And June 30th, by the way, is the day the campaign realized they had money problems. Why? Because they had to file. They didn't realize they were blowing the money they were blowing at the rate they were blowing it until they had to do it. And then that led them to do what some of their influencers have done, not pay their bills, to make the money look like it's better than it is. The truth is, they don't have $97 million cash on hand as of the end of June because they didn't pay a lot of their bills. They waited to make the numbers look better. Same thing with the campaign. But if you look at some scumbag drunks that, that are tied to the campaign, they don't pay their bills either. So what do you expect? The Super PAC's fundraising haul includes millions of dollars from former supporters of Trump who publicly cut ties after his 21 U.S. Capitol riots, including Nevada hotel magnate Robert Bigelow. Listen, Bigelow was never a huge supporter. I don't know what the hell they're talking about. And by the way, to classify him as a hotel magnate compared to what he really does is something. Who gave more than $20 million. Bigelow is a defense contractor and Harry Reid's friend. He jumped on the Trump train when Trump obviously was the president and had the power. He was not an early supporter of Donald Trump. He was not somebody who was on Trump's train. He is one of many, many of these mega donor people who decided to just give Trump money anyway later in Trump's political career so they can attempt to have a seat at the table. And what Trump said in Erie the other day is absolutely true, that he's getting calls from these people now. Anyway, Bigelow gave more than $20 million. Silicon Valley investor Douglas Leone gave $2 million. The two biggest donors in Republican politics during the 2022 cycle, packaging magnates Richard and Elizabeth Uihlein, also gave $1 million each. Well, we told you about them, actually. They were one of the first ones. That's when they didn't just give this. Richard and Elizabeth Uihlein were the first ones in the Palm Coast meeting to say, I'm sorry, but we're pumping the brakes until we see some polling increases. Companies controlled by the Florida housing director, Maury Hassani, who loaned a golf simulator for DeSantis' use and benefited from a $92 million state transportation grant near his properties, gave $1 million. Oh my God. Laura, this smells like corruption so bad. I'm sorry. It does. Other seven-figure, this is Tallahassee, folks. This is what Tallahassee is known for, Republican and Democrat. Other seven-figure donors include Saul Fox, a major GOP donor, recently thanked Trump for his support of Israel by offering him a loan of antiquities. Stephen Brody, the founder of a Pennsylvania biotechnology firm, and David J. Millstone, the CEO of roofing company Standard Industries. Such large donations, combined with the transfer of $82.5 million from the governor's Florida political operation have allowed Never Back Down to build a more expansive political operation than any other group this cycle, with the goal of pushing the boundaries of what an outside group can do to help a presidential campaign. That's their nice way of saying, pushing the boundaries is their nice way of saying they're teetering on illegality. What they have been doing this cycle is not what PACs traditionally do. And it is almost impossible to imagine that they could handle some of these operations without coordinating illegally with the campaign, which is what Loomer has recently been all over. Like, for instance, I'm not going to bring their names up because I don't want to give them any gravitas at all, but someone who claims to be one of DeSantis's bigger donors, having both the PAC and the campaign's ear at the same time in Utah, who also happens to like to frequent gentlemen's clubs and may even have worked at them on their spare time out of fun. And people are like, oh my God, Republican donors do this. Ladies and gentlemen, if Laura could only tell you some of the stories I've had to deal with, it's a lot of swingers. I mean, Laura, I don't want to get into it, but like, you think Republican donor and you think like, you know, the Moons or something, and like these like Christian like fundamentalists, like no, especially not in Florida. They'll preach that shit on Twitter all day, but some of these couples are really something else. At the same time, DeSantis' own operation has been forced to cut back spending amid a decline in his polling numbers. Never Back Down officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss non-public matters talked to the Washington Post before Monday's campaign finance filing, sharing extensive internal data that they will be contained in the group's formal filing to the Federal Election Commission, as well as some information that will not. Chris Jankowski, the group's chief executive officer, plans to tell the group's leadership in a memo that the mid-year report will show that Never Back Down spent $4 out of every $5 on voter contact. Building a custom national voter file and technology investments are driving the group's field program. Now, all of that does sound great. The problem is who they're using for their vendors. The vendors are literally the same firms that are in the NBC News report about them faking data and currently are being sued for faking voter contact information. He said they've built the most experienced team ever formed at a super PAC, and that their efforts to adhere to strict governance and contracting standards, include limited commissions to consultants, fundraisers, and vendors, have resulted in a highly efficient operation. You mean like the walkers that were caught on camera in South Carolina? Despite the financial prowess of Never Back Down, DeSantis has continued to lose ground against Trump in national and some, they keep saying this stuff that they write is ridiculous, some early state polls. No, every early state poll. As Harry Enton just bluntly pointed out in the article we went over in the first segment of this episode, there is no state where DeSantis is doing well. Not one, including his own. They spent all this money for a historic collapse in support. And if Republicans were to build a nationwide custom voter file for a sophisticated get out the vote operation, you damn sure don't want them to hire these people. A New York Times Siena College poll released Monday showed Trump leading the field with the backing of 54% of likely Republican voters. DeSantis trailed with the support of 17%, and no other candidate drew the support of more than 3% of GOP voters. And by the way, he's only at 17 because they used all phone. The group raised $130 million from the start of the year, most of it consisting, thank you, at least being honest here, most of it consisting of money transferred from the DeSantis Florida group, and they spent $33.8 million between March and June alone, building a staff of 121 people and a contract workforce of about 240 canvassers who work out of 11 offices across the country. About 85% of the funds they spent through the end of June went to what they call direct voter contact, a category that includes television, digital, and mail advertisement, as well as the group's field director of paid canvassers. That's a lot of money for Jeff Rowe and his vendors. Never Back Down is trying to do something that has never been attempted in presidential politics, using unregulated checks of unlimited size to pay for most of the business typically associated with a candidate and campaign during a nomination fight, including event organizing, voter modeling, campaign fundraising, endorsement recruiting, and even parts of the convention delegate strategy. I don't know, folks. I don't know. This really sounds illegal to me. A lot of this just sounds. Why? Because you can't possibly conduct these activities without the campaign being aware and coordinating with them. You can't. It can't be done. The group spent about $15.5 million in television, radio, and digital ads over the first 6 months of the year, more than any presidential operation except for the super PAC affiliated with Trump, according to the media tracking firm Ad Impact. Never Back Down also shouldered some of DeSantis' campaign fundraising costs. I mean, there's a video right now, folks, of him going to the bar at the event this weekend. And they said, oh, we have somebody's card. And he said, whose? Never Back Down. Okay, charge my drinks to that. Nobody's done this before. That's not supposed to be the way this goes, folks. It raised about $740 through the end of June. That's it. By way of 8,000 new donors for the campaign, which is limited by law to raising no more than $3,300 from individuals for the primary campaign official set. Every conversation at the door, every text message reply is making us smarter and more efficient, Jankowski said in a statement. I'll be honest, I've seen their texts. They are underwhelming. They are not very good. We are running a full-scale operation that has never been done before at this level by either party. Donald Trump is using most of his donors' money to cover his legal fees. This isn't close. That's the latest stupid attack that doesn't. What it really does is show how badly they don't understand the Republican electorate. First of all, there's a disclaimer. So the idea that he's scamming people out of it is ridiculous. I looked myself months ago when Alvin Bragg first indicted Donald Trump. There was a disclaimer right there that said some of this will be used to pay for legal fees. Also, his super PAC pays legal fees of people who are also being persecuted because of their support for him. So it's not just him. That's number one. Number two, people will be honored to give them money to help pay for his defense. Don't they understand that? Instead of trying to launch these stupid fake little attacks, they should be trying to inspire people like that. The group's officials say they aim to raise an additional $100 million by March 2024. As donors who do not want to appear on this week's disclosure reports write checks. Never Back Down also plans to send an increasing number of invitations to DeSantis to participate in fundraising events after intentionally limiting their requests after the campaign got started. The group also plans to step up its role in organizing events for DeSantis to appear at as the governor's campaign cuts back on costs. Again, guys, I don't know. This is very, very dangerously close to it. I'm not a lawyer, but I will tell you this. There are always lawyers that consult campaigns. This is, especially in the current environment, I wouldn't expect Biden to prosecute DeSantis because he's not afraid of Ron DeSantis. But the people associated with this very well could be prosecuted after all of this is said and done. I'm in this environment. If you were really worried about the administrative state, you would not do this. Under campaign finance rules, DeSantis can appear at fundraisers for Never Back Down, but he cannot ask directly for money in excess of federal candidate limits. He can attend bus tours, parade events, and even political rallies put on by Never Back Down as a special guest. But DeSantis and Never Back Down leadership are not allowed to coordinate directly on most spending decisions. Well, folks, Laura Loomer already showed that that's happening. You cannot be together like they were in the same room giving donors the pitch about how you intend to win and what you intend to spend money on. That is illegal campaign coordination. You cannot do that. But the fact is, they know that they have no grassroots support. So this is big donors and a big donor candidate attempting to skirt the rules to deal with the fact that they don't have the base support most campaigns rely on to win. And obviously it's not working because they've been out there kicking out millions for months and he's done nothing but collapse. His official campaign, which raised $20 million in the 6 weeks between his announcement and the end of June, has faced scrutiny for its high expenses, leading to a round of layoffs this month. While some other GOP presidential rivals are traveling in commercial planes, DeSantis' campaign spent $1.5 million on travel and private planes over 6 weeks, which accounted for about 20% of its total spending in the second quarter. Jesus. Of the $20 million that DeSantis raised, $3 million is earmarked for the general election and cannot be used for the nomination. This is what I've been trying to tell you, folks. It is not true that DeSantis outraised Trump. It's not true. Just the campaign alone. Forget about PACs. It is not true. Trump's money is all primary money. 1 out of $6 raised by the DeSantis campaign is because they are mega donors who already maxed out in the primary and now have begun to give toward the general election, but the money cannot be used in the primary. In other words, he did not outraise Trump. Trump outraised him. Many of DeSantis' campaign donors have already given the maximum allowed by law. Trump also faced criticism after a political action committee that raises money with his campaign spent more than $40 million on legal costs in the first half of 2023 to defend Trump, his advisors, and others. Right. Like it says when you go to give the donation. This is not going to hurt him. Never back down officials say they're running an efficient operation. They're all the same people who work for Ted Cruz. All right. But they're saying they have worked to limit the profit margins of their vendors. Well, because if they're doing so much volume, they can legitimately say they've been doing that. But at the same time, their vendors are getting filthy rich. It doesn't matter. So if I charge you 0.0175 cents per record of every voter contact list, right? Normally, but then you know, I'm only giving you a list of like 50,000, but now you're this giant pack and you're coming to me and I say, okay, I will shave off 1.005. So, okay, I really reduced my profit margin, but doesn't matter considering how much money is being spent by volume. That's what they're doing, and it's a gimmick. Look, Axiom took a commission of 1.75% for the media placement. So what they did, they paid $16.4 million, right, which was $14.8 million worth of media buys. And they not only took that money to do that, they took a 1.75% commission for the placement itself, or $259,000 just to place him and his material in media. And it says lower than the industry standard. Okay, but again, it's a gimmick. He said in a memo that there was no commissions paid to fundraisers, media consultants, or any other vendors. A canvassing vendor owned by Axiom, Vanguard Strategies, was paid $1.2 million, while Blitz Canvassing, a vendor owned by GP3, the company of DeSantis advisor Phil Cox, was paid $2.8 million. Both vendors are in charge of hiring and deploying door knockers across targeted states. This is unreal. Unreal. So they're using both the establishment firms and one of them that is being sued for faking canvassing data. I honestly can't even go forward. The filing is going to show a $109,000 in-kind donation to the group from Axiom, which is the consulting firm. That's a result of the contract that Jeff Rowe initially signed with the group, which limited expenses, right? The donation reflects flights, hotel rooms, meals, and strategic consultant time by Rowe and others that are not going to be billed by the PAC. Right. Because he just took it off. He's getting it from other places, other things. I can't even keep it. This is so, I'm sorry. You want to talk about Donald Trump grifting his donors? Because some of the expenses to a political action committee he has goes towards his legal fees. I don't even know what to say. Laura, is there a link to go on Locals to sign up? Yep, you go on to Locals and you hit the subscription link, but I will give you a link right now. Oops, almost hit the wrong thing. Let me go back. Yeah, it's 2:05, so we're going to wrap it up here. I did want to give that, though, to people. Here it is. link address. I'm just going to put it in there. Can only find the one-time support. Yeah, I did read the whole thing. There, I give that link to you, Laura. You can give it around, and I'll put it in YouTube. I'll put it all the way around. Here's I'm just going to title it locals. That will give you your actual like dashboard to subscribe. Okay. Let me see. Where is Rumble? Rumble, here's for you. Locals, you have it already. Although there should be somebody in there that's free. Because the show does play on locals for free. And Getter, here's Getter. Anybody else need it? Then grab it from Laura, okay? Damn, it's time to go already. I had so much I still wanted to talk about. Wednesday, next week is What Are the Odds? Don't forget, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to talk a little bit more about Florida. We're going to do, I mean, I have it in the bank. I had it earmarked. Speaking of earmarked, I have it earmarked. So I might as well do it, you know? And in the meantime, the public polling project, we got a burst from it. We did. Publicly funded, public opinion. You like our new logo? You like our new little graphic? Isn't that cute? Everybody's got their little thing up in the air. I like it. It's also on locals, and it looks good too. And that just says support the public polling project or something. But yeah, share it far and wide. We're doing great. We're almost there to our next national. You know me. I'm willing to swallow a big chunk of it myself. We had a nice little boost. That's great. Considering how big our audience has been lately, again, if everybody just gave $1, we could do this every month, no problem. Yes. So if you're already a supporter on locals, you are grandfathered in if you have an annual plan already. If you're a monthly person, you're grandfathered in until you go to change it, or if you were to churn or something like that. Now is the time. If you're a monthly local supporter, now is the time to change it to an annual and make sure that you are grandfathered in at the $5 rate. Because if you wait till tomorrow, it will be $7. All right. So don't forget. Yeah, I'll put it up again, Laura. Join the community. Join the community. Join the community. Today is the day, the last day to save yourself some money. We have so much going on. We have Mississippi. We got Kentucky. We got Louisiana. And of course, we have all of the stuff coming up from 2024, in addition to all the polling we're going to try to do. All right. But delegate tracker, delegate estimator, we're going to cover every single primary. Next week, we'll be doing the governor's race. So there's a lot coming. We're really, really excited about it, but it does cost a lot of money. So that's why we bumped the cost of locals $2. Sorry. No, seriously, everybody else had already done it. And I was like, no, I don't want to do it yet. I don't want to do it yet. When the election gets closer, I'll do it. When the election gets closer, I'll do it. But Laura and I, we do a lot of, really, when it comes to polling, it's like a weird double-edged sword. Like, you have to keep polling to remain relevant, right? So it almost doesn't matter whether or not we hit the mark with the public polling project. But since we haven't been, and truthfully, we have not been, we've wound up spending more than we really probably should have. So we did this a little bit early. Let's see. Maybe
I also wanted to say, though, it's not only to remain relevant, but it's actually nice to
tell the truth
as it's going and where it's going. And it's just very telling. So the data is really nice to see in a shorter time period than drawn out. Because those gaps, like what happened in that gap, you know what I'm saying?
That's right. And Laura, look, like, we knew Trump's lead was consolidated because of the educated vote. He started winning. He always won the non-college vote, but or the non-credentialed vote. But then those margins just went to the moon. And then even the New York Times, you can see it right here in the crosstabs in the New York Times. White college, he's winning 37-25. White no college, 62-13. Non-white with a college degree, he's got half that vote, to 12% for DeSantis. And then non-white no college, 59-13. We knew about the consolidation of the college vote. You need to win. And we saw that trend before anybody. The non-whites, the younger, by the way, look by age, 59-15. He's winning 18 to 29-year-olds, 65 plus. 60-9. Where's the lane for these people? The 30-34 is 41-28. That's DeSantis' closest lane. He's still getting blown out. 45-64, 51-21. So we knew about this, and we knew about And by the way, look by city type. They say city type. We say area. It's a city, a suburb, or a rural area. Cities where they thought they were going to be able to stop Trump, 66-9. And then rural, 54-15. Even in the suburbs, 50-20. So it is very, very difficult to dip your toe in the water, is what Laura is saying all the time. What Laura is trying to say is it's better to take the temperature of the water frequently than try to dip your toe in once in a while. All right. You'll be surprised by what you see and maybe not be able to make very much sense of it. But if you track it monthly, then you have a much better chance of understanding the trend and the way things are going.
And
right?
what variable changed that trend?
Yeah. And I would expect him to back off from where we had him last time. What was it, 57, 59? It may have backed off a little bit, but he's still going to have a dominant lead. But I want to see what's going on with the demographics. The overall doesn't really interest me that much. I already know what the overall is going to be. It's a historic lead. That's basically historically insurmountable. I mean, that's it. But where demographically is the interesting stuff. And then the general election stuff. And if you didn't see the Freeform Friday with Mark Robert, he had some really interesting ideas, which we have tried somewhat. But he wanted to ask questions to show how far some people are willing to go to win politically. So, are Democrats willing to cheat? Or do you care if Democrats cheat in order to win? Things like that. Would you fill in an absentee ballot if you thought you weren't going to get caught? Things like that. And that's some really good ideas. But, he wants some. I told him to send me some ideas, and maybe I'll throw one or two in there. But for the most part, the Trump or bust vote, modeling the electorate. Is it getting worse? Is it not? What's happening? That is of most interest to me because, if we were to model the electorate of those we know are going to show up in Iowa, then you got Trump. Obviously, he's probably going to have like a 10-point lead. But, with him close to 50%, even though it's like 44 or something with the entire electorate, including those who are not showing up or undecided. But everyone else is looking like Mitt Romney versus Barack Obama. I mean, it's close. And then at the end of the day, those people did not vote for Republicans. They didn't. They voted against them and voted for Barack Obama. And they lost both those states. So, all right. With that in mind, all signed up. Thank you, Jonathan. And we will see you guys. I know. Don't worry. We got to be patient. We got some things in the works. We got a neon sign. All right. We have plans. Don't worry. We got plans. It's just that.
I just want to say, if y'all see drawings in the back behind Rich, it's because I started
she's getting
the
ready.
Background. Okay. It won't be that way.
It's going to plot out where things are going to go. So we're also going to move stuff. We're going to shift stuff so we have more room in a wider shot. All right. So you'll see. But patience is a virtue. Patience. It's coming. All right. It's 2:15. I'm out. Thanks for watching, folks. We'll see you on Wednesday. Locals, see you soon. I got the book club up for you. We just finished the ideological origins. We're going to do some Federalist conversation about what we're going to do next, which will deal with some questions surrounding the Federalist arguments versus anti-Federalist arguments. All wrapping that up so we can get into election material when the elections are upon us, which is soon. It will be sooner than you think. I'm telling you, which is why lock in your rate on locals right now. I had nothing but love for you guys. I will see you on Wednesday. All the best.
Deuces.
Pundit out. Deuces.